Hi, I'm Samantha. When I first entered high school, I felt completely positive about it, and I thought that it was going to be the start of something great. It was a chance for me to make new friends, have new experiences, and hopefully to become more popular. But turns out it was harder than I thought. You see, in middle school, I was not exactly the most popular girl in my grade. I did have some friends, but I often felt ignored or that people didn't pay attention to me enough. I didn't want to have the same feeling all throughout my high school experience. But even though I was very optimistic going to high school, soon I noticed that I had a lot of the same feelings and difficulties that I had in middle school. I just didn't seem to connect well with people and had trouble escaping the ideas that my classmates seemed to have of me that I was just a boring, generic girl. So I thought to myself, what can I do to get more attention from the people in my school? What will make me stand out? I started dressing differently and changing my look. I experimented with many different makeup and hairstyle options. I wore different clothes and I started to try to talk to people more, even though I'm very shy naturally. While these things gave me some small results, it felt like progress was being made too slowly. I just was not that satisfied with the results that I was getting. What else could I do? I wondered. What is going to make me seem as cool as Beverly, the new star of the cheerleading squad, or Allison, who is dating the captain of the soccer team? I thought and I thought and I thought, but nothing came to mind. My life was just too boring. But then I had an epiphany. Maybe that was the problem itself. My life was too boring! I needed to make myself seem interesting, relevant, cool. But how could I do this if I and everyone around me considered me to be uninteresting? Then I came up with it. I needed to start making things up in order to get more attention. I needed to tell lies. My mother had always told me when I was younger that it was bad to tell lies. But what she didn't tell me was that without the help of lying, it would be very difficult for me to seem interesting to my peer group. So, I decided to test out my lying theory. I figured that I would start with some small lies, just to see if people would believe me, and if they would give me more attention because of them. So one morning when I was walking into school, I saw a group of some moderately popular girls discussing the new Justin Bieber song. They all seemed to like it, and I knew one of the girls in the group, so I felt relatively comfortable going up and saying something to them. Don't panic, I said to myself as I slowly approached the group. They will believe you, I continued. Suddenly, I was standing right next to the group of 5 girls, and they all stopped and looked at me, not exactly sure what I was doing there. That new Justin Bieber song is great, right? I said. Yes, said one of the girls. I love it so much. I've been listening to it on repeat like all week. The other girls just sort of looked at me, unsure of what exactly my intentions were approaching the group. The one I knew just looked surprised. My heart started to beat faster because I knew I was about to tell a major lie. I gathered the courage and slowly opened my mouth to speak. You know, I said, I met him last July and he gave me his autograph and asked me to hang out. Oh my God, shut up, said Karen, who was the most popular girl in the group and who was the leader. Did you really? Yes, I said, carrying on with the lie as I showed them a picture of us together. He's even more gorgeous in real life. You wouldn't believe it. The truth was that I did see him one time getting out of his car and took a quick picture with him, but nothing more. Where were you when you met him? Asked another girl who I could tell wasn't sure if I was telling the truth or not. Oh no, what do I say now? I thought. I knew that I had to come up with something believable. I was eating dinner in a fancy sushi restaurant, but I was getting bad reception on my phone. I wanted to check my text, so I stepped outside for a minute. It turns out he was eating in the restaurant right next door and also wasn't getting any service. He was standing outside trying to get service too. Oh my God, said Karen. So what happened next? Well, I continued on, slowly starting to feel more comfortable with the lying process. I could barely speak because I was so starstruck, but I managed to say, oh my God, you're Justin Bieber. He then looked up from his phone, smiled at me and said, haha, yep. The group of girls now all seemed to be convinced and they were giggling and making high-pitched shrieking noises. So I carried on. I knew I had to act quickly because I knew he would only be standing there for a second and then he would go back inside. I needed to get his autograph. I had my clutch in my hand, which I knew had a marker in it, but I didn't have anything to write on, so I just said, "Can you sign my phone case?" "Sure," he said. So I took out my purple Sharpie and gave him my phone. He opened the marker, signed his name, gave me the phone and the marker back, said, "We can hang out later if you want." The girls were absolutely amazed by this information. They begged me to bring in the phone case, and whenever I ran into any one of them throughout the day, they excitedly came up to me to ask me more questions about the Biebs. I was only too happy to answer. When I went home from school that day, I knew that I had found what I was looking for, a way to actually get more attention from people in my school. This was amazing. That night, I got out an old phone case, found a purple Sharpie, and scrawled the words Justin Bieber across the back in a messy type of way that looked like a boy could have done it. When I brought it into school the next day, I was invited to sit at the popular table by Karen at lunch. Even though I had gone to both elementary school and middle school with Karen, she had barely ever spoken to me, let alone invited me to sit with her. When I watched her holding the phone case and inspect with a gleam of true amazement in her eyes, I knew I had struck gold. Over the next few weeks, I continued telling lies regularly in order to keep the attention coming in. I would tell the athletes in chemistry class that I was there when the Red Sox won the World Series in 2018. I told the nerds that I had seen every episode of The Big Bang Theory. I even told some girls in chorus that I had a special genetic variation that allowed my voice box to be more powerful so that I could sing like Adele. All in all, the lying was going very well. But unfortunately, one day I took it too far, and you will never believe what ended up happening. It all started on a Friday afternoon when a bunch of the popular kids were discussing going to the beach after class. Apparently, a cute lacrosse player named Brian had found a new spot where you could jump off of a cliff into the ocean. Of course, I desperately wanted to be involved in this trip. It would be the perfect way to bond with the popular boys and the popular girls at the same time, and solidify my status as being one of the cool kids. However, because I was on the fringes of this elite group of about 10 to 20 people, I wasn't sure that they would invite me. So, once again, I turned to my trusty new superpower, lying. "You know," I said to the group, suddenly becoming a part of the conversation, "I did some cliff diving in the Maldives when I went there with my cousin during spring break one year. A local cliff diver taught us how to do backflips. I could come and show you guys a good technique if you want." "No way," said Brian. "You can do a backflip? That's epic." One of Brian's friends chimed in and said, "Yeah, you should definitely come." I was in. My completely made-up cliff jump backflipping talent had piqued their curiosity just enough to get me a spot on the trip. So after school, I joined Karen, Allison, Brian, and about 10 of their friends, and we piled into cars owned by the older kids and started heading towards the beach after we stopped at our houses and picked up our bathing suits. Driving down to the ocean, I couldn't help but feel like I had finally made it. The sun was shining, I was hanging out with the popular kids, even riding in cars with boys who were a few years older than I was. It was truly amazing. In fact, it was so amazing that I had completely forgotten that I had promised to them that I could do a backflip off of a freaking cliff. My brief feeling of social euphoria ended very quickly once we got to the ocean. I could tell that Brian and his friends had actually found a real cliff jumping spot because after we got out of the cars, we were quickly walking over some very rocky terrain on our way to the cliff. "We're almost there," said Brian as we neared the water, and with a few more steps across the rocky terrain, we were there. From the top of the cliff, I could see for miles and miles straight out on either side. I could see a swimming beach nearby and some houses that were on the shore. I guess that the water was about 25 to 30 feet down, and there were some significant waves. It was absolutely terrifying. "Okay," said Brian's friend looking at me. "Why don't you go first and show us this amazing backflip?" "Yeah," I said, trying not to tremble. "Sounds great." I then took off my shorts and shirt, so I was just in my bathing suit and slowly walked over to the cliff. By now, I could tell that some of the girls could see that I was nervous and were probably doubting my cliff jumping abilities. But I was determined to at least try to prove them wrong. So, I slowly walked out over the cliff, and then they began to chant my name. "Samantha! Samantha! Samantha! Samantha!" They chanted as I approached the edge. I slowly looked over and could see the absolutely terrifying drop in all of its unwavering truth. "Samantha! Samantha! Samantha!" They kept chanting as I slowly turned around and got into position to leap off of the cliff and do a perfect backflip, which I knew for a fact I could never do. As I stood there preparing to jump, it all just became too much. This lie of my backflipping talent had been like a balloon that had lifted me high into the air and got me invited on this trip. But now, it was as if someone had suddenly popped the balloon. I felt dizzy and faint, and all of a sudden, I passed out. I fainted right as I was about to jump off the cliff, and I fell into the ocean from 30 feet. Instead of doing a glorious backflip, I did a perfect belly flop. Luckily, the cold water instantly pulled me out of my dizzy spell, but I was struggling to swim. Brian and 2 of his friends saw this and quickly dove off the cliff to help rescue me. After several minutes of struggling, they helped pull me to shore. Everyone else had come down from the cliff too. I coughed up some water, pulled some seaweed out of my hair, and then just waited to see what would happen next as they were all huddled around me. "You've never been to the Maldives, have you?" said Brian at last. "Well, not exactly," I said, at which point they all groaned and shook their heads in disappointment. Then they started walking back up to the top of the cliff. The jig was up. My lies had finally caught up to me because they got out of control. From that point on, I tried not to lie as much. I didn't want to face any more situations where I was passing out on top of cliffs. But to this day, Karen still believes that I hung out with Justin Bieber. And that's what really counts. Did you like my story? Please tell me what you thought of it in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more.